Hi everyone, I'm Dom from Solida. In today's video, I'll be going through the lead management template I use in Notion. And if you like this template, then you can download it for free with the link in the description. Now, I won't be going through this build from the ground up today, but I will be going through the different sections, explaining how they link, highlighting some of the cool formulas I've used, and finally explaining the flow of the template by going through an example. So the lead manager is made up of a dashboard, which you can see here, and 3 databases. So there's a database for meetings, contacts, and companies. So this navigation bar you can see at the top is how you move around the template, and there is one of these on every other page in the template, and they're all synced. As you can see, this is a sync block. You can tell by the red border around it if I hover just on the border here. Now, I think it's always important to have a consistent way to move around, as well as complete some of the quick key actions that you might want to take when using the template. So just to demonstrate the kind of consistency of having this navigation bar, let's just quickly jump to the meetings database and have a look at the new meeting template. As you can see, we have the navigation bar right here. So I don't think you always need to have a template as part of each database, but if you are going to have one, I think it kind of always makes sense to have a consistent navigation bar at the top of it so that you can always move around the template. You can, of course, use the breadcrumb at the top, and you can also create a breadcrumb block. But the nice thing about navigation bars, it's kind of always in the exact same place, and you can also add buttons as well as page links. So going back to the dashboard, below the navigation bar, we have meetings over here on the left, reminders, and then tasks. So you can basically see at a snapshot kind of all of the key bits of information you need right at the top of the dashboard. And in terms of views, I have a simple weekly, monthly view for meetings, and for tasks, we just have a table and an archive. If you do download the template, I think I'd probably recommend replacing the tasks and maybe even the meetings database with whatever tasks and meetings database you're currently using, just to prevent having hundreds of different tasks databases that you're kind of combing through every time you try and figure out what to do. It's better to just have one database and then create linked instances of that database in different pages and different views using the right filters to kind of highlight only the key information that you're looking for. So just scrolling back up here, that would mean just removing this database here by deleting it, creating a new view, and then doing the same again with tasks. Moving down, we have our final 2 databases here. So the next one is contacts. The first view lists all of the contacts that you have and gives some high-level information about them. So we've got their title here, we've got the company that they work for, we've got the stage that they are at as a contact, which we'll go through in a bit more detail in a second. And then we've got this cool one here, which automatically posts the last meeting you had with them and then the next meeting that you might have with them. So this is quite a cool formula. And thanks to Ziki and Purple Notion for the inspiration on this one. What it basically does is it creates a variable for last meeting and a variable for next meeting. And the way it does this is it uses the map function. So what we want to do first is look at the meetings database. We want to use the map function to firstly look at the current value that pertains to the relation that we have here. So the meeting has a relation to the contacts. So you recall what contacts you're meeting with during the meeting. So by mapping to current, what we're saying basically is, okay, which meetings has this client had? So that's what the current means. And then what the map function actually does is allows you to kind of look along the row of the current value at some of the different properties related to that value. because really when we talk about a variable, what Notion's looking at is the name of the variable. So in this case, it would be the name of the person that you met with, or the name of the meeting. But what we want to know is the date of the meeting. So we can map across to the date property, and then we can use filters and sorts to find the last meeting or find the first meeting. So once we've done that, what we do is we can present that. And if you just look at how it's presented on the card, it's quite neatly done. Where you say last meeting, you can then click on the meeting itself. And then you can see the date that it happened. And another interesting thing I want to point out, and I've mentioned this in a previous video where I specifically go into detail about it, is the use of regular expressions here. So that backslash and n here, what that is saying is to put everything after that on a new line. And that is why you have this neat layout here where you can see last meeting and then next meeting, and irrespective of the size of the card on the gallery view, it will always be broken down such that last meeting and next meeting are on two different lines. So you don't have a messy situation where, for example, here now you have next meeting immediately after the date here, and it just doesn't look as neat. So looking at the extra views we have here in the contacts database, I think the staged one is probably the one that you'd actually use the most. And this is effectively how you move contacts through your sales pipeline. So the way I actually do it is slightly different to the way you're supposed to do it. So a lead is supposed to be anyone who has expressed interest in your product. Once I have a potential contact, even if I'm not necessarily sure that they've expressed interest, I just kind of put them in as a lead anyway, just to kind of preempt that. Once you have had a chance to speak to them and have confirmed kind of concrete interest in the product or service, then you can move them to be a qualified lead. Once you're in the kind of process of discussing contractuals, then you can move them to be an opportunity. And then the three green properties here, I've just kind of come up with build, support, and coach as a way of showing an example where you might have three different services that you offer. You could move that down to one green property that's just client, for example, or you can change the names or add more to kind of match all the different services that you have. And then finally, we have offboarded clients. So we can move a client onto offboarded, and they'll just kind of disappear straight away into the other view that we have, which is the archive. So now you can see here that any clients that we've offboarded, they do remain. And then finally, we just have a list of clients by service type, which can be just useful to get at a glance understanding of kind of where the majority of your client base sits in terms of what you're offering. If you only have one service, then potentially consider deleting this view, just to kind of keep things as streamlined as possible. Moving over to companies, we simply have a gallery view of all of the companies and then an archive view. Now, I tend to view the companies database more of like a Rolodex than a database that I actively interact with, because I think it's kind of more important to focus on the specific contact, especially if you're dealing with a bigger company. You might have multiple contacts from the same company and they might progress to different contract. So as a result, we've only got two views, and one of them is an archive. But there are a few cool formulas here. So the first one is a simple sum of all of the different contacts you have. So for Salida, we have two contacts, and for Liverpool, we have one contact. And this basically just counts how many values there are in the contacts property for the relation to the specific company. The next one we have looks at all the different unique stages for each contact associated with the company. So the first step is to create a variable for the stage variable that maps across to the stage property, only takes unique values. So if we have 4 clients on the same service, it's not going to surface that result 4 times. And then formats it as text. The next section of this formula effectively looks to match the text that has been picked up by the first stage against every single different contact stage that we have. So those are lead, qualified lead, opportunity, and then 3 different services. And then what I've also done is I've included some formatting to match the style so that it is the same color as the properties that we have in the context database. So let's say for Salida, if they're both in coaching, this will be green. But if there are 2 different sections matched in the same company, then it makes it brown just to show that there is kind of a variation. And then the final formula we have, which is another cool one and somewhat similar to the one that we saw in the context database for the last meeting, next meeting formula. And shout out again to Sev still. I'll put all the relevant Twitter handles in the description if you want to kind of follow them, because all 3 of those are real masters of Notion formulas and definitely worth following if you want to get a bit of a deeper understanding of how Notion formulas work. So this one, yeah, it's a lot more simple, as you can see, because it's just using properties that exist in the contacts database, mapping across using the relation property. So just to explain that slightly better, this is a relation. So this relation property shows all people in the contacts database that have this company name attached to it. That is how, when we look at the formula here and we map current, it knows that we only want to look at contacts for this company. It doesn't pull every single contact that we have in the contacts database. And then what we do with the second part of the mapping function is we then just effectively join together all the different properties that we want to surface on the card. So that is current. By current, we just mean the initial property that the relation looks at, which is the name. So that would just be where it says Dom Spanos. And then the next is to look at the email address of the current relation properties. So that would be the email address here. And the next one is the phone number. And then again, we see some regex here that just makes sure that each contact's on a different line. And that's how you get this cool effect here where the 2 contacts end up sort of side by side next to each other, with the name almost like a title and then the email address and phone number underneath. So these comprise all the databases in the template, but I did want to quickly note that I only use this template for lead generation, as the name suggests. So this isn't where I handle contracted clients. The way the flow works for me is that once an opportunity moves to being a client, that will be because they have signed an agreement or a contract. And I have a process set up whereby clients complete a tally form. And once they complete that tally form, this updates a separate database I have, which is a contracted clients database. So that's all automated. And that way I kind of have an ID number for the signature of the contract and the exact date and time and all that kind of stuff. It also means that I can allow my contracted clients database to remain uncluttered with all the potential leads, contacts, situations that don't pan out and things like that. So all of that is kept separate in my kind of enclosed lead space. And then the contracted clients database is almost like my projects database, where each contracted client has a template that is our shared workspace. So I want to keep that kind of separate and neat from all of the lead generation activities that I'm doing. But what we'll do now is we'll go through an example flow so you can kind of get an understanding of how that works. So let's say initially we have a meeting. So today is the 17th of November. Let's say we have a meeting tomorrow with a company and with a new contact. And we can give it a tag based on some of the kind of generic meeting types that you might have. You obviously feel free to change these as relevant. So let's just say it's a first call, it's a discovery call. So now we've actually created a new contact and a new company, but we don't have any information. As you can see here, we just have when the next meeting is and the name. So let's say Tim is the founder of his company. Link him to test company. Stage is a lead. We haven't spoken to him yet, so he's not a qualified lead. We can add in here a URL, email, and phone number. So I'll just add these in quickly. Okay, so this is all filled in. One extra thing to note quickly is that I've created a contact ID, and this is almost an addition to the ID property, which Notion already has. So the ID property simply generates a number, a unique number for each entry into the database. But the problem I have with this is that if I'm just looking at an ID number or an ID number with a prefix added to it, it doesn't necessarily give me a good understanding of what the individual item in that database is. Obviously, the way that humans recognize database entries, especially that database entry is a person's name, is by the first and last name. So I've just created a contact ID that takes into account the first and last name and then adds a unique number onto the end. That way, if I see this contact ID, I kind of have an idea of who that person is without having to then dig into the database and match the ID with the name. Okay, so now let's go into the company. We can see that we have one contact. This is the contact information. And again, we can add a company URL, email address, and phone number. We can also add any tasks or reminders. And we can add tasks by adding a new task. Let's call it test company task. And we can link it to the meeting that it's for, and it will automatically populate the company name and the contacts. And then if we go into the new meeting entry and go down to tasks, we can see that that's already populated here in this table, which is filtered. So as we kind of have more and more meetings and progress them through our pipeline, we can move them from stage to stage. And then once they become a client, for me, this is kind of where the use of this database would end. You can use this database as your kind of end-to-end client management database. It's just simply kind of worked out better for me to have two different databases. And actually, let's just quickly, I can show you how that works. So this is my kind of agreement setup. And at the end, they enter this information. They agree to the proposal. They confirm payment. They enter the date. And then once I hit submit, you can see this has automatically been added to my contracted clients database. And there's a unique respondent ID and there's a unique submission ID. So the same client submits multiple agreements. This can be matched via the respondent ID, and the submission ID will be unique every time. So that's the Lead Manager. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and be sure to check out the description for the template, where there is formulas, a link to this template, and a link to set up a discovery call if you want to explore Notion builds or coaching. Thanks very much.